Hello. So before anyone jumps to conclusions with this one about myself, I would simply ask you to watch the whole video so that you can understand the context. I want to explain why I have voted for the Labour Party this year, in this general election, this 2019 Christmas Brexit climate change election, whatever you want to call it. Um, I've just watched, incidentally, a very creative PR video by Boris Johnson, Vote Conservative actually, and it's a skit almost identical, almost exactly identical to the famous scene in Love Actually, where Andrew Lincoln's character holds the signs at the door. Keira Knightley comes to the door, and if you've seen the film, you'll know the scene I mean. The Prime Minister is holding the signs, and he has this female voter who is obviously playing the role of Keira Knightley. It's even down to uh, the same clothing and everything. It's creative, I'll give him that, but it is pretty cringy. Get Brexit done is the mantra. Um, okay, there's a number of things I want to say here, so bear with me. The point, by the way, of this is not to convince anyone else of how to vote. That's up to you. Rather, just to explain why I have finally decided to go this way. I have a postal ballot, by the way, so yeah. Um, I've never voted for Labour at parliamentary level. I'd always voted Liberal Democrat. Um, I think possibly once I voted for an independent, but I'd always been Liberal Democrat because whilst I'm far from happy with them, they most aligned to my outlook. I stood twice as a Liberal Democrat councillor unsuccessfully in 2008 and 2010. You can see my name on Wikipedia, Hendon Ward, Sunderland. And I freely admit, I wasn't successful. It was just a taste in low-level politics. That was 9 years ago. A lot happens in 9 years. Now, I have not suddenly become a socialist. I have not suddenly um, kind of become, well, I haven't become a Corbynite. That goes without saying. Usually in general elections, I vote for the party and not the candidate. But this time round, I voted for the candidate. Um, in Sunderland Central, my local MP is Julie Elliott. Now, I get the impression she's worked particularly hard in this general election to get support. And I suspect it may be because perhaps she feels a threat from the Brexit Party. Although I discovered earlier the Brexit Party candidate is, was when he was selected, a Tory councillor in West Sussex. The Tory candidate doesn't even live in Sunderland. He's got an address in Kingston and Surbiton. Now, in the 21st century, I don't think it's particularly unusual for people to move around, so I wouldn't expect a candidate, for example, to be born in the city. Our last MP, Chris Mullen, who's famous for his role in the Birmingham Six campaign, was from Essex, and he served and was re-elected for many years. Um, so, I've given Julie Elliott my vote because I genuinely think she is a good MP. I genuinely think she is hardworking, and I respect the role she had on the reality TV committee, which was scrutinising the Jeremy Kyle show. Now, if you've seen my videos on the Jeremy Kyle show, you'll know I have very strong views on that. So this is a direct sort of link to something I feel strongly about, to something I can see my local MP doing. Um, committees are selective. Not every MP is on them. So the fact that she chose to be on that particular committee, I give her a lot of respect for that because I think it's an important committee. But generally, she clearly cares about Sunderland. Um, I think that her record speaks for itself. I'm not going to say she's a perfect MP. I'm not going to say that I would agree with all of her positions. Um, but I definitely get the impression that she is an MP who does put her constituency first. I've seen no evidence to the contrary. Um, I know the young guy that's standing as a Lib Dem candidate. He's a good lad. You know, I've no hostility towards any of the other candidates, although I'm not impressed by the fact that the Tory and Brexit Party candidates don't even live here. But leaving that aside, I've nothing against the other candidates. But the only other material I've got through the post is from the Brexit Party, a message from Nigel Farage. Um, but you know that I'm not going to vote for the Brexit Party. I voted Remain. I'm not calling for another referendum, but yeah, I'm not a Brexiteer, so that's kind of obvious. I'm not going to vote for the Brexit Party. Right, so people might say, whoa, Nathan, all the things you said about Corbyn, are you now insincere? Well, no, I stand by everything I've said about Corbyn. And I would mention, whether this was deliberate or not, Julie Elliott had no reference to Jeremy Corbyn on her material that she put through the post. So who knows whether that's deliberate or not? I don't know. Ross Kemp was in Sunderland the day before yesterday. The Prime Minister was actually here yesterday at the Nissan plant. But Ross Kemp, the actor and journalist, was in Sunderland the day before pitching for Julie Elliott. Not that a celebrity would ever sway my vote, but yeah, he made some very good points about the fact that she has really put Sunderland first. And I agree with that. I've seen nothing to the contrary, and I genuinely think she's a hardworking MP. I've always got a good impression from her. I've spoken to her a few times, and yeah, that's my gut feeling. She's been MP of Sunderland Central since 2010. Now, to be fair, Sunderland is a strong Labour seat. It's been Labour since, I believe, 1959, so a long, long time. Um, and I'd be very surprised if Julie Elliott lost her majority. She's got 9,000 majority. I'd be very surprised if she lost it. But no Labour MP or Tory MP, no MP in a safe seat can ever be complacent. But that's another reason I voted for her, because I don't think that she is. I don't get the impression she takes it for granted. I've heard of other MPs in other seats who do kind of take it for granted, and I've never got that impression from Julie Elliott. You know, I've never got the impression of, oh, well, I'm going to win anyway, so I won't bother campaigning. So to me, that's a good sign. Um, my gut feeling about, what is it, Thursday? Yeah, Thursday's election is, I don't know. I think we might be heading for a hung parliament or a small Tory majority. And I certainly don't want more uncertainty. And the Tories are making a compelling argument that only with a Tory majority will there not be more referendums. I really, really don't like the idea of another EU referendum, another Scottish referendum, because that will inevitably follow. Because the Scottish Nationals will say, oh, well, if there's another EU referendum, we're going to have a referendum. And whilst the British government could legally reject that, you know, it's going to create a lot of tension in Scotland, as I suspect there will be anyway. But um, I'm not happy with Corbyn's position on that. I think he's pretty vague, as he is with Brexit. Now, with Brexit, McDonnell and others have said that actually it's leadership to take a neutral stance. I'm not so sure about that, because this is the major issue of the day, along with the climate change issue. And I think that you have to take a position, you have to make it clear to the public where you stand. And the problem is, I don't think anyone really knows where Jeremy Corbyn personally stands on the issue of Brexit. That's a problem, because a prime minister can't be a referee. A prime minister can't just be a passive observer. A prime minister has to, you know, take a position. I remain incredibly wary of Corbyn's foreign policy positions, particularly, for example, the fact that he chaired the Stop the War Coalition for a number of years, an organisation I am very, very sceptical of. Um, and the fact that he has a very murky record when it comes to terrorism. Now, his supporters get really up in arms when he's called a terrorist sympathiser, but there is a whole litany of evidence that point to this. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn, the fact of the matter is he has fraternised with Islamists. He has fraternised with some very unsavoury people. And I voted Labour, but I still dislike the tunnel vision of Corbynites. I still dislike the blind loyalty they have to St. Jeremy, like he can do no wrong. And I very much dislike the fact that any criticism is immediately dismissed as a right-wing smear. Look, the Murdoch press are obviously anti-Corbyn, and they were always going to be. They were also anti-Miliband. I mean, that's what they do. The right-wing rags, like The Sun and the Daily Mail, have no time for them. But that doesn't mean the claims are false. And how do you explain the fact that centre-left people are also very wary of Corbyn's foreign policy? So when it comes to that, I remain very wary. But I kind of temper that with the fact that, there are still many level heads within the Labour Party. And I really don't think, you have to remember, a Prime Minister doesn't have absolute power, nor does his cabinet. So even if we have a hard left government in Jeremy Corbyn and a Trump bench, I also think there's a degree of hyperbole from the right. This idea, for example, that, Corbyn is going to be a dictator. I really don't believe that for a second. I don't think we have a situation in this country where that can easily happen. I don't think we have the mechanisms for that to take place because there are too many level heads within Labour that wouldn't allow it to happen. I really believe that. And really, can you see Jeremy Corbyn as a strongman dictator? Come on. But here's the thing. The Tory record over the last 9 years is one of higher unemployment, higher rough sleeping. Well, with unemployment, I don't want to go into full details with this because it would take a whole thesis, but the DWP, the sort of figures that the government talks about need to be treated with caution because there's a lot of people that aren't signing on or they're in very fragile work conditions that are not fully employed. There's a lot of things that have swayed me towards Labour. The way that claimants have been treated by the DWP, particularly disabled claimants, is absolutely disgusting. I do regard it as a 21st century equivalent of workhouses in the sense that people sign on because they have to. People went to workhouses because they had to. And yet they really don't want to. There's been some truly horrifying cases of people who have been permanently ill, being bullied by the DWP and told to fit to work. And the Tory party has done absolutely nothing to temper this. They have actively encouraged it. Now, I've been through the system, so I know what it's like. And so that personal experience has definitely been a factor in my decision here. I really don't think that the Tories really understand or give a damn about the mental stress the claimants go through. Because if they did, they wouldn't be making these vague sound bites, oh, we're helping people into work, or Johnson's pathetic answer of people can get money up front if they really need it. He knows full well it is not that simple. It's not. And ever since 2010, the Tories they've tempered it a little bit in the last few years, but I cannot overlook the fact that this party in 2010 had those horrible billboards. We'll support the Shrivers over the Scroungers. It was a cynical, nasty attempt to turn the wider public against the unemployed. Anyone that thinks the system is easy needs to go through it. So when people say that the Tories have blood on their hands for driving people over the edge with suicide, it really isn't an exaggeration. Homelessness is a problem that's always been in society. There was homelessness under Labour, but the fact of the matter is rough sleeping always increases on the Tory watch. It increased in the 90s under the Major government, and it's increased now. This is just a fact. And, I've heard Tories say, oh, well, what about under Labour councils? But the point is, councils get funding from government. So ultimately, this is on the government's watch and it's on the Tories' watch. That is just a verifiable fact. Rough sleeping has increased, food banks have increased. So for me, as a centrist, it's kind of been a battle between the left side of my thinking and the right side of my thinking. Now, the right side of my thinking, issues like national security, foreign policy, although I wouldn't even call that particularly right wing, but anyway, yeah, national security, crime, definitely. I don't particularly trust Jeremy Corbyn on crime. I think the Tories are probably the party I would trust most, but actually the record is pretty disappointing. They talk tough, but we still see a situation of early release. And yes, both parties are culpable for that. But, the Tories talk tough, but we still see a situation of heinous crimes not resulting in the sort of penalties that really they do merit. Now, that's on the Tory watch. So I definitely don't trust Labour when it comes to, holding thugs to account, especially not Jeremy Corbyn. So that's certainly a side that I wouldn't be happy about. But I think what's ultimately swayed me is that in the end of the day, when it comes to the basic question of which leader and which party cares about the most vulnerable in society more, I have to say Labour. The Tories can talk about enterprise, they can talk about self responsibility, they can talk about opportunity. All those things have their place. But in the end of the day, the Tory mindset, I believe, is survival of the fittest. And to be clear here, I am not saying that every individual Tory is a callous person. I know there are individual Tories who give to charity and they are decent people and they do decent things. But I still believe that the guiding principle of the Conservative Party is survival of the fittest. They worship profit. They look up to profit. I do not think at heart the Tories really care about the most vulnerable in society. And why does that matter? It matters because if we can't care for the most vulnerable in society, you know, we really have some way to go to call ourselves a truly civilized nation. I believe we're a great nation. I believe that Britain is a much better place to live than many other countries, but we can be so much better. And I just don't think that the Tories really care about rough sleepers, I mean, just look at the action from Tory councils. They see rough sleepers as a nuisance and need to be cleared away, swept under the carpet. That is the Tory attitude. Just look at attitudes like that coming from Priti Patel in Barrow and Furness. Look at the attitude of the Tory candidate in Broxtowe in Nottinghamshire, who said that people go to food banks because they can't handle finances. It's this callous, indifferent, and out of touch attitude that so many Tories have. The Tory candidate that said disabled people should get less pay, and she said she was taken out of context. But I think it points to a fundamental mindset. You may see unsavoury attitudes from Labour people, and yes, I know there's the anti-Semitism issue. I'll come to that in a second. But I think fundamentally you are more likely to see this survival of the fittest mentality with Tories. Now, with this anti-Semitism issue, I don't downplay that. I do think it's a real problem in Labour ranks. But I'll say this: I suspect, on some level, on some level, it's exaggerated. I think there are definitely anti-Semites in Labour ranks. I think that Corbyn has definitely pandered to Islamists and some very unsavoury people. However, I do have a little bit of a problem with this idea that certain Jewish organisations claim that they represent all British Jews. The fact of the matter is, there are British Jews who support Corbyn and support the Labour Party. Now, they're the minority, that has to be emphasised, but No organisation can claim it represents everyone. Just like the Muslim Council of Britain can't claim to represent all British Muslims, I don't think that a rabbi who spoke out can claim that he represents all British Jews. And I feel that their voice is kind of being ignored. So, also, it goes without saying the Tories have capitalised on it, which is pretty cynical. I mean, I don't for a second downplay it. There is plenty of evidence to show that there is a problem within the Labour Party, but I've heard people say, for example, Corbyn hates Jews himself. I've seen no evidence for that. I think he's done too little, too late in terms of, for example, distancing himself from anti-Semites. But when the Simon Wiesenthal Centre calls him the anti-Semite of the year, ahead of neo-Nazis, that seems problematic to me. Anyway, I'll round this up. So yes, I voted for Labour because I believe that in my city, my seat, Julie Elliott, the Labour candidate is the best candidate. On the national scene, the social compassion side of Labour sways me because ultimately I think they care more than the Tories do. And yes, there's other parties, but in the end of the day, only one of these two parties will form government. So yes, there's the Liberal Democrats. Incidentally, I may as well say the reason I didn't vote Liberal Democrats, it's not just because they can't form government, but it's also because I feel I don't agree with their positions on crime, but I also feel they've been far too silent on the issue of pan-Islamism. Now, Labour's also been silent on that. Corbyn certainly has, but I expect Liberals to be outspoken on that, and they haven't. The left-wing socialists, not so surprised by it. Summed up, I remain very wary of Corbyn. I will continue to criticise Corbyn. But in the end of the day, I trust Jeremy Corbyn more than Boris Johnson when it comes to helping the most vulnerable people in this country. And for me, that has to count for something. When I go into Sunderland city centre and I see people sleeping rough, to me, that is a Tory record. And it's replicated all over the country. And it is disgraceful in the world's fifth biggest economy, as Corbyn said, in this day and age. So part of me actually hopes there'll be a Labour victory, not because I want a far left government, but to kind of show the Tories that they're not born to rule. And thinking of the damage the Tories have done with austerity, with deep cuts. I mean, Johnson says it's a mistake, but that it's election time. I don't believe he's sincere about that for a second. I think on a personal basis, Johnson is far more insincere than Corbyn. Corbyn's wrong about a lot of things, but I don't believe he's insincere in of himself. I believe Johnson is a promiscuous liar, prolific liar, I should say. Um, this matters. Um, so yeah, what I was going to say was Labour. I really don't believe that if Corbyn wins, we're going to see some sort of far left totalitarian dictatorship, because I believe that the centrists within Labour, the reasonable heads, will keep it in check. And I honestly don't think they could do much more damage than what the Tories have already done. So why not give them a chance? And if they make a complete mess of it, we'll know never to vote in the Labour government again. But I honestly don't think it can't be any worse than what the Tories have done over the last 9 years. That's my gut feeling. Tories are scaremongering a bit. They're saying if Corbyn gets in, we're going to see a far left dictatorship. I mean, let's get real. Are people really suggesting that if Jeremy Corbyn becomes Prime Minister, all other parties are going to be outlawed and we'll all have to, read the Communist Manifesto? Get real. Certainly, Corbyn and his inner circle have some pretty far left tendencies. I mean, McDonnell and Seamus Milne's support for Stalinism, their statements over the years. and Diane Abbott's downplaying of Chairman Mao are a disgrace, to which they should be hotly critiqued. But I really do believe that the centrists will hold Labour in check. Anyway, I've spoken for 25 minutes now. I'll round it up. That is why this year I voted Labour. And that doesn't mean I'm going to do it next time. It doesn't mean that I'm suddenly a Labour man. It doesn't mean I'm suddenly pro Corbyn. I'm not. But ultimately, I just think that Labour have a social compassion that the Tories just don't. And that's not an attack on individual Tories, it's an attack on the party direction.